1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 32 through 34. I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife, and his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. We're continuing to look at the issue of, as I described it in the opening message, retrofitting our marriages. A retrofit is a project that involves something that already exists, but it needs improvement, it needs strengthening to be able to handle present and any future challenges, storms, stresses, that sort of thing. And indeed, these are days when our marriages need to be improved so as to handle the storms of life. And so we're talking about how to do that. And we established in the opening message that the first phase of this home improvement project, if you will, is to shut the door to divorce. If you want to get your marriage on track and see God bring some real healing and health and goodness to your relationship, then the first thing to do is to make a recommitment to the relationship. And unfortunately, many people in our society and even in the church are opting out of marriages that they promised before God and witnesses that they would remain in until death. And we took time to establish that, yes, there are a couple of biblical grounds for divorce, and we need to be aware of them. But we also need to remind ourselves that those exceptions certainly are not the rule. The rule is marriage is for life. And that shouldn't come as a surprise to married folk, because that's exactly what we stood up and said, that we would be in this till the end. And so we talked about shutting the door to divorce. Now, we want to pick it up and talk about shutting ourselves into the marriage, and what is that really going to look like? I mean, if you shut the door to divorce, that means you're closing yourself in. All right, we're in here. Now, let's make this work. And I want to suggest to you that in shutting ourselves into our marriage, we must decide to become teammates rather than adversaries. Have you noticed, not in your marriage, but in other people's, that there is a real tendency on the part of a lot of married people to become quite adversarial? And they are positioned in their minds and in their hearts and their attitudes and their words, in their actions, they are positioned as enemy combatants rather than as teammates. Now, when you think about that, you can see why so many relationships are going so wrong. If you see your spouse, if you treat your spouse, if you view your spouse as the enemy, there's no hope for your marriage, because the goal with an enemy is to take them out. When you have an enemy, your goal is to take the enemy out. When you have an enemy, there is a contest where there must be a winner and a loser. Do you see now why so many marriages are in trouble? If my spouse is my enemy, I'm going to take him or her out. And while they lay on the canvas, I will jump around like Rocky. Your marriage will get nowhere if that happens. So what must we do instead? We must view ourselves as the Bible would have us view ourselves, which is as teammates. Genesis 2:24, which we referenced before, but it's worth taking a second look at, says, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife," not fight his wife. Be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. You've got to shift your paradigm, because when I have an enemy, I've got an adversary that I want to take out. But when I have a teammate, we both have a common enemy. When we're on the same team, then we both want to win. And there's an enemy out there that must be defeated. And we all know the enemies of our relationships. Anything that comes against the oneness and the welfare of your marriage is an enemy, be it person, place, or thing, priority, bad habit, wrong words, whatever. They are the enemy, not my spouse. And that's why even in arguing in marriage, the Bible says you can be angry, but don't sin. How do we sin? When I begin to treat my spouse as my enemy and begin to take out my very teammate. That's sinful in the eyes of God, because I am now defeating the purpose for marriage that he established, which is oneness. And so what we want to do is to talk about some of the ways that we can begin to partner up as teammates. Now, as we move into this, and I'm going to call on Meredith in a few minutes to share a point. As we move into this, I want to encourage you married folks now to take out your rake and put away your shovel. Take out your rake. A rake will bring to you what you need. And put away your shovel, which says, oh, that point is good for him. Oh, I'm so glad Sister Meredith said that. Trust the Holy Spirit that he knows how to do a better job of talking to your spouse than you can do by signifying. Take out your rake, because God has ways over the next few messages that he'll be speaking to all of us. Now, if you want to do this home improvement right, this project that we talked about, you not only do the first phase of shutting the divorce door, but secondly, you want to become aware of your spouse's needs and then learn how to meet them. Needs and desires. Now, we're going to be using that term relatively, because in the technical sense, we're not necessarily talking about needs as if you can't do without these things. There are a lot of folks who have single-handedly held together a bad marriage because their spouse is completely uncooperative, completely insensitive to God, his word, their spouse's feelings. And so we know, and you know too, plenty of people who have single-handedly held a relationship together while having none of their felt needs, or most of their felt needs, go unmet. And so we use the word needs in a very relative sense, because the fact of the matter is, there is nothing I need that will come from my spouse. There are things I want and desire, and there are things that, very frankly, from a biblical perspective, my spouse owes me. But whether or not my spouse meets up to his or her end of the bargain, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And so it's important to know that as we use the word needs and desires, we're speaking in a very relative term, because these are felt needs that we have, things that we want to receive from our spouse, and things that in many cases our spouse actually owes us from a biblical perspective. But please don't act like if your spouse doesn't treat you exactly right, your life is destined to fall apart. It doesn't have to, because God is able to strengthen you and to give you a grace that is sufficient. But we want to talk about, we've identified some common felt needs that husbands have that wives need to be sensitive to, and some common felt needs that wives have that husbands need to be sensitive to. And we'll share those over the next couple of messages. So I'm going to ask Meredith to come and to share the first thing with men that is a common felt need among married women. Now, these don't all apply to every relationship. So some of the points we will make don't necessarily apply to every relationship, but they do apply to many. And so along the way, we'll hit a point or two that hits you. So even if you say, oh, that's not my point, well, then just intercede for the other people. And I promise you, we will hit one that addresses you and your marriage. This is Meredith, my wife since 1982. Give her a hand, everybody.
We are here to help you in your marriages. For those who aren't married, these are things that if you can learn it up front, it will sure bless your spouse when you do get married. And we're not speaking from a perspective of perfection, like we have this all together. I love the scripture that talks about faith. It says faith comes by hearing and hearing and hearing and hearing. And so as we keep in mind that this is a team, that we are a one flesh union, and we're thinking win-win, what we do for our spouse is good for our marriage. Michael Jordan, He is great at what he does because he practices and practices and practices. And so that's what I want to encourage my brothers to do this morning for your marriages, because when your wife wins, you win. Okay, sisters, now I'm representing you this morning. Don't y'all leave me hanging up here. One of the most common needs that a wife has from her husband, a desire, is for affection. Amen. Affection. My brothers, what is that? Affection is the ongoing demonstration of love, fondness, tenderness, warm feelings, attachment, closeness, endearment, devotion, kindness, and tenderness. Willard Harley, in his book, His Needs, Her Needs, he says, to most women, affection symbolizes security, protection, comfort, and approval. And these are all very important aspects of demonstrating love to your wife. When you show her affection, you are giving her an enhanced sense of security, of protection, comfort, and approval, that you approve of her. And brothers, we want your approval. Sometimes it's nice to know that we can be strong women, we can have our own sense of self-worth and self-esteem, but there's nothing like knowing that our spouse approves of us. Okay, what does this look like? Affection is expressed or demonstrated best through loving words and actions. It helps to meet our most basic needs, and this is a basic need for everyone, not just women, our basic needs for belonging, love, and worth. Affection sets the stage and becomes the ideal breeding ground for the cultivation of intimacy in marriage. So again, what does it look like? Loving words, loving deeds. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, she wrote a poem, and she says, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Let's count some ways. What are some ways you can show your wife that you love her and that you're going to display affection towards her? That's what Elizabeth Barrett Browning said. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Well, James Ingram helped us. Remember that song, 100 Ways? He sang my whole message. Compliment what she does. Send her roses just because. If it's violins she loves, let them play. Dedicate her favorite song and hold her closer all night long. Love her today. Find 100 ways. There's another great book that's out in addition to Willard Harley's His Needs, Her Needs, and that's Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages. Now, James Ingram said 100 ways, and Gary Chapman helps the brothers to know what that actually looks like. As I said, loving words and loving deeds, words of admiration, words of affirmation, words of appreciation. We like compliments. If you're not sure what to compliment your wife about, check her out from head to toe. Look at her hair. Do you like the way she wears it? Do you like her earrings? Do you like her makeup? Just check us out head to toe. What about the way we look, the way we carry ourselves, the way that we delight you? If it stimulates your senses, let us know about it. Don't keep it a secret. We like to hear compliments, and sometimes after we're married, husbands don't lavish them on us like they did when we were single or courting or dating. But do you know that we hear it outside the house? Other men tend to display what they like. We get looks from other men. Some men compliment us. I remember one brother asked me, I was out with my son, and a guy asked me, he actually said the name of my perfume. He said, are you wearing such and such? And I was so impressed because not only did he like the way I smelled, he knew the name of my perfume. Brother, he took that to a whole different level, and I loved it. If you like the way she smells, if you like her perfume, let her know. It's so nice. And when we get that from other people, what it says to the wife is, how come my husband can't do that? Here's a perfect stranger that expressed appreciation for this. So remember, compliments, we like that. Encouragement, gratitude, and thanks. If you like something that we did, tell us, thank us. You're guaranteed to have us do it again. One of the things I so appreciated about my father, he complimented every single meal that he was served. And there were some times that growing up, our entire dinner came out of a can. The vegetables, the meat, the little side dishes, everything came out of a can. But my father always said, very good, thank you, I enjoyed the meal. And that is wonderful. Now, if he could do that over canned food, and sometimes I think back, canned spaghetti, Spam, string beans, stuff out of a can, things I wouldn't serve now, but compliments. He expressed his appreciation. A second form of affection is together time. Nothing says you appreciate us more than when you spend time with us. And it doesn't have to be all day, it doesn't have to be a very long time, but together time is important. When we know that we have your undivided attention, it can be in a conversation, when you stop what you're doing, when you put the newspaper down, when you turn off the TV, or you stop looking at it and you look toward us. We really do appreciate that together time. Long or short, spending quality time together is essential to any relationship. And then there is gifts. Some women just love gifts. Now I'm going to give you 5 different things. This is the third one. The first one was words. The second was together time. This is gifts. Based on your wife's likes, preferences, interests, tastes, gifts represent love, care, and thoughtfulness. Remember those special days, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, and then remember that you can make any day a special day when you give a just because gift. That is a wonderful way of demonstrating your love. And that's what Scripture says. You're being like your Heavenly Father. You're being like God. He so loved that He gave. We enjoy being given to. Remember, a gift for no special occasion makes any day special. Hallmark has helped us a lot. Hallmark, their slogan is, when you care to send the very best. We like cards. I'm not sure which flower company it is, but I know their slogan is, say it with flowers. If she likes flowers, give her flowers. We all are familiar with the song, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. If she likes jewelry, give her jewelry. Don't give the gift of an appliance unless you are absolutely, positively sure that's what she wants. Now, that may be something that we need, but don't give us an appliance and expect us to feel like you're being affectionate towards us. And one other gift. Lingerie, that's nice, but that's a gift for you, not for us. That doesn't count. And fourth, acts of service. Doing things you know your wife would like you to do. And if you're unsure what that is, ask her. The things that we do on a general basis and on a continual basis, we like having that done. We like having a meal fixed for us. We like having help with the housework or chores. Something that your wife typically does, when you do it for her, watch what the response will be. And it doesn't make you weak. That doesn't make you a punk. That makes you a real man. There are some personal examples that I like to share with you. Typically, Paul calls me before he comes home and he asks me, is there anything that I need from the grocery store? That's a big help. I appreciate that. That shows me affection. Now, I used to feel bad, like, oh my goodness, does that mean he doesn't think I shopped, I didn't cook, whatever? But it really means a lot to me that he is thoughtful enough to ask me before he comes home. He runs my shower every Sunday morning. Now, that might help him get out of the house on time, but It's also very nice. I don't step into a cold shower. The water has been running. He comes in, he wakes me up, he just turns on the shower. I appreciate that too. These are just different acts of service. On Saturdays, I do not cook. My husband provides the meals all day long on Saturdays, and I have my mother-in-law to thank for that. He said, my mother-in-law didn't cook on Saturday, and neither will you. Love that. And I'd also like to let you know, brothers, that chivalry is not dead. Most women love being treated like a lady. When you open car doors for us, when you hold out our chair, when you walk on the outside of the street, we appreciate all those little things. We love it. When you help us up and down steps, we can get up and down, but we just love it when you treat us like that. Manners matter. And I once read, this is leading to my final point, I once read that taking out the garbage without being asked is the sincerest form of foreplay. That really speaks love to us. Without being asked, that's great. And that brings me to Chapman's fifth and final act of affection, physical touch. Hugs, kisses, hand-holding, sitting close, and lovemaking all communicate emotional love. And that's important because although we're going to discuss this in greater detail in a future message, Harley says in his book again, His Needs, Her Needs, when it comes to sex and affection, you can't have one without the other. And that's why affection is so important to a woman. Without affection, many wives feel unloved, but with affection, the one flesh teammate bond is greatly enhanced.
Before she gets away, let me ask Meredith to just give a word of encouragement to men who would say, I definitely want to improve in the area of showing affection, but my background is of such that I'm not a touchy person. A lot of times people are raised in an environment or with a mindset, and sometimes temperament contributes to it, where they're very unaffectionate in terms of these kinds of ways. But yet, he has a heart and desire to want to do that. What would you say on behalf of wives to encourage men who want to develop some of the right disciplines that don't come naturally to them?
First of all, I think wives need to understand that it is a struggle for your husbands. There are certain things that we just have to come to accept, that what means something to one person doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to the other. And we are two different species, two different creations. And so if you have tolerance and patience with your spouse, if your husband is not naturally affectionate, you want to encourage him lovingly and with patience. If your frustration comes through, that's going to be a turnoff. And if you don't show acknowledgement of what he's doing, his attempts, that will also inhibit him, or it hinders him from doing it again. So positive reinforcement, feedback, when you notice that he does things, it's important to mention that and let your husband know that you appreciate what he's trying to do, and not to make him feel bad in the process.
Good. Appreciate it. Good job. We were teammates. I could have given her the pat that, I want to make a point now to wives, and we'll do this over the next few messages, where I'm going to ask Meredith to speak especially words of challenge and encouragement to men, and I'll be doing the same to women, because very often when you go to conferences, men are speaking to men and women are speaking to women, and the same is true in reading books and material on marriage. But there's an added dimension that you can get of understanding when you hear from the point of view of the opposite sex. Now, it requires a degree of maturity and openness, because the tendency on the part of some is to become very defensive. And so there's a challenge there, but I think there's also a great potential benefit. Meredith has shared that one of the common ways husbands can seek to please their wives. Now, remember, we're basing this on the premise of what Paul alluded to in 1 Corinthians 7, where he said, a married man aims to please his wife. At least that is the normal state of a marriage. And if your marriage is in disrepair, then you want to get back to a better place and an improvement, which means you want to make the decision, yes, since I'm committed to this marriage for life, we might as well make it as good as it can be. And therefore, I make the commitment to begin to learn how to please my wife. What would it take to please her? And so she has shared with us, gentlemen, that the first way we can do that is affection, is to develop some better affectionate habits. Wives, one of the points I want to share with you, one of the ways to please your husband is by maintaining physical attractiveness. Ladies, physical attractiveness for many married men is very important. And therefore, if you're married to a man, now there are exceptions to every rule. There are wives, perhaps, for whom affection isn't a really big deal at all. But that would be the exception, not the rule. The rule is all the stats and marriage material confirms and counseling sessions confirm that that is a rule. And the same is true with physical attractiveness. There are men who don't care what their wives look like. But the three of them are the exception to the rule. Now, let me say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I am not making a case for the fact that you need to look like someone's image of beauty. Not the point at all. You probably are aware of what attracted your husband to you years ago. And in many cases, you were aware on some level, again, there are a few exceptions, but the general rule is that in part, it had to do with how you looked to him. If you dated and you looked any old kind of way showing up on the dates, and you never led him to believe that you enjoy fixing up or that his visual stimulation is a priority to you, if you always came just as I am without one plea, then you're free to continue in that trend. But if you started out paying attention to detail and making sure your clothing was just right and your hair was just right and your makeup was just right and you took good care of the way you wanted to look in a way, your goal was to make him smile and to be proud that he was out with you. And if that's the case, I want to suggest to you that you do a great disservice to your marriage when you try to change the rules in the middle of the game. It's like changing the rules in the middle of the game. Say, well, I know this is what it took to get you, but I got you now. And I got other things on my mind and other priorities. You just really need to grow up. I want to let you know you have set your marriage up for a problem. Now, I've been in pastoral ministry for a long time, and I've heard all kinds of objections over the years as I sat and counseled with husbands and wives about their troubles. And when it comes to this issue, sometimes it would be raised and the man would share his dissatisfaction with her lack of care about the way she looks. That did not characterize their early life, but characterizes their present life. And very often I've heard women say things like, well, I want him to love me for who I am, not for the way I look. And my response in counseling and what I want to say to you now is, well, there are two problems with that. Number one, he does care. Now, hopefully, it's not the only thing about you he loves. And hopefully, especially if he's a man of the word, he is learning that agape love is the depth of love that God has for us that is not based on because of, but it is actually an in spite of love. So it is able to love a woman who is not pleasing me in a lot of ways. That having been said, though, eros is another form of love, erotic love, that has very much to do with aesthetics, has very much to do with appearance. And when it comes to men, we are, generally speaking, hardwired in such a way that we are quite visual in terms of what turns us on. So true is that you know not to let your husband go to certain stores. Because if he sees a shiny new thing that he didn't go to the store to get. See, we often think women are the only impulse buyers. Not so. A man can leave home saying, I'm going to get one thing, and see something that appears as very much visual. Whoa, look at that. He doesn't need another TV, but look at how that TV looks. Hardwired, man, visual. His thoughts don't go to the functions of it. What can it accomplish that the other? No, man, look at that thing. Some men are driving a car they can't afford because they saw it. go down the street and say, whoa. And found out what kind it was and started researching. And of course, the salesmen are gifted at selling you something you can't afford. And they help you believe the lie you want to believe. And the result is you show up with a new car and a rationalization about how you're going to pay for it. Visually hardwired. You know that's true about non-physical, non-sexual things. And you also know in many cases it's true with your husband when it comes to women. There's no secret that pornography for the most part is aimed at men. Why is that the case? Because we are hardwired in such a way that physical appearance, physical beauty, however we define beauty, can be quite the temptation for a man. There's a book, Every Man's Battle, and it talks about the fact that men are hardwired and predisposed to temptation where it comes to sexual fantasies and misconduct and all of the rest of it. It's a hardwiring issue. Women are wired differently. Some women, certainly physical appearance is somewhat important to them, but most men I have ever talked to and ever counseled have in the top 5 list of most important things physical attractiveness. It's somewhere in the top 5. Some of them have it in the top 3. Some have it in the top 2. So here's the challenge, sisters. Rather than to resent that, rather than say, he ought to love me for who I am, not what I look like. Well, first of all, be honest with yourself. You knew that you were advertising yourself a certain way when you were dating him. In some cases, I've had women admit to me in counseling chambers, Pastor, you're right. The way I look now, I know he would have never taken a second look at me if I showed up at our dates and our times together looking this same way, wearing this same stuff, hair looking the way it is. Some women then have to make a decision. I want to please my husband. We're not adversaries. See, the adversarial position is just grow up and quit being so childish and care about what somebody looks. That's so immature. That's adversarial, and it'll get you more problems in your marriage than you want to deal with. Now, here is the point. You want to do this because it pleases your husband. But in helping to make the point, let me show you, I want to show you his perspective, but let me show you the enemy's perspective. Because your marriage has an enemy. The enemy looks at you, sees you no longer care that pleases him, but you don't do it. That you take extra care of what you wear and how you fix up. You know it matters to him, but you have bought into all these rationalizations. I got these children, I got my job, he just gonna just grow up. Okay, the enemy sees that. Sees your husband's struggle to say, I used to be in a position where I couldn't wait to see her. And now it's very different. And the enemy says, And on the job are any number of women who are fixing up for any variety of reasons. Most of them probably don't have designs on your husband, though a couple may. But for various reasons, women will fix up in the workplace. He works in proximity to those women. You are home resenting the fact that he isn't happy with the way you look. And these women are showing up every day looking the way he wish you would look. Do you see how the enemy has him set up? I got a wife who wishes I would grow up and quit being visual and just be a man. And I got people over here who are going up and down in the elevators at the office complex, and I see them going by and lunch and all, and the man is hardwired, cars, electronic equipment, TVs, and women, to say, whoa. Now, godly men are learning, don't look too long. We're teaching them from the word. We're all trying to learn. Every man's battle. Don't look too long. Hit it and quit it. Look and okay. You notice her go by, and something in you wants you to continue to look, but there is a spirit that you're controlled by that says, no, that's not my wife. I'm not going to lust, inordinate desire. I looked, and the enemy said, didn't she look good? Yes. I'm not going to lie. Don't ever ask your husband, now, please. What do you see in her? Have you ever seen none of you, but I've seen foolish wives. I've seen foolish wives do that. Now look at that. You know she bought all that. What? And you want him to go on the record about what he thinks about the way she looks? You don't want to hear that. Thank God if the man is trying to become a man after God's own heart, that he refuses to stare and to undress with his eyes. And you know as well as I do, with many of the fashions and all, we don't have to undress with our eyes. They did the undressing for us before they came to work. And so the enemy has an agenda that you want to be aware of. And so what you want to do, if you want to please your husband, we want to be teammates. I want to give him the gift of making him as happy as I can make him. See, society has us set up to get real funky about that in our marriages. Trying to please somebody else. They ought to be pleasing. See, that's set up to destroy your marriage. No, it's a good thing. Happy is the man who has a happy wife. Happy is the woman who has a happy husband. Don't ask her to be your adversary. Ask her to be your teammate. Don't ask him to be your adversary. Ask him to be your teammate. And one of the ways we can demonstrate that we're committed one to another is in the case of men saying, hey, I'm not very affectionate, perhaps. I'm not very romantic. I heard more men say, oh, I'm not very romantic. Welcome to the club. Probably most of us are not automatically romantic. But for the sake of pleasing, this is a gift you give. You're not looking for anything. See, the real blessing in marriage is if you seek to please your spouse and your spouse seeks to please you, both get what you want. And you say, well, what if I have a spouse who isn't concerned about pleasing me? Well, why don't you set the example of what it looks like? And so later on, when you want to come to them and share your felt needs and desires, you have the credibility of saying, do you know why I take the extra time in the bathroom I do fixing up? Honey, it's for you. Do you know why I put up some of those clothes that were God-forsaken? It's for you. And so you want to make a quality decision to say, I want to do the best job of pleasing my spouse. And challenge number one for us men is be as affectionate as you can. If you don't know, see, the good thing about marriage is you have a lifetime to train and to get better at things. And so I want to encourage you to find some time, if you're completely clueless as to what would really bless your wife in the area of affection. You have no idea. Sit down with her and say, or go to breakfast, go to dinner, spend some time and say, you know what? Let me hear what would really make you happy in terms of maybe 2 or 3 habits that I could start working on developing. And let her share with you what would make her happy. And then go to work on those things. Now, Meredith has already exhorted wives to recognize the fact that it's going to be a process for him. He's not going to become Don Juan overnight. But let the process begin and you encourage it and see what improvements can come. And wives, let me challenge you to say, you know what? Yes, I am married to one of the 90-some% of men who really care, who want to look with pride at his wife. That shouldn't be impractical. When you go to different seasons in life, you're not going to look like some 22-year-old. It ought to be practical. Different seasons call for different things. And the man ought to know that because he's getting old. You see these men in denial walking around talking about, I'm just the same man I was in my 20s. You're tripping. That's what you're doing. So recognize the seasons of change, but at the same time, make a greater commitment to say, hey, I want a smile to break out on his face when he sees that I take extra time and consideration. And you can't do it every day. And there got to be times where you reach agreement and say, hey, there are times when I need to dress, this way just for functional reasons around the house or whatever. I can't be a beauty queen and get all this stuff done at the same time. But if you'll work with me, if you'll tolerate some of what I need you to tolerate, when we go out, when we set aside some time, and we'll be talking about that along the way, I'll make it worth your while. I'll make sure you go out with a woman who makes you feel proud. And we team up to improve our marriages.